Hi, Dave Coplin here, bringing you another Rise of the Human special. This week we've got an interview with a wonderful author, Brad Borkan, who is the author of this book, Audacious Goals and Remarkable Results. A really fascinating story about three incredible individuals and what we can learn from them in modern day business. This is actually the edited version of that interview, so just a shortened highlights, if you like, overview for you to get your teeth into. If you're really interested in more detail, there's a longer interview, which as always is published separately, and you get the full hour conversation with Brad and I. Anyway, sit back and enjoy it. I know you're going to enjoy this one. Well, listen, I'm so glad you could join us. The thing I love about the book is you've brought together three iconic figures from history and trying to underline what we can learn from them in our modern life, specifically in modern businesses. You picked on an engineer, a statesman, and an explorer. I'm going to leave you to explain who and why. But look, just give us an overview of the book. Audacious Goals, Remarkable Results. Tell me a bit more about what the book's about.
Well, it was great fun to write this book, and it is a book that evolved. It wasn't what we originally planned to write about. My co-author and I had previously written a book about the life and death decisions the early Antarctic explorers made on the ice and what we can learn from them for modern day decision making. And that book's called When Your Life Depends on It. And that was quite successful. And we thought, let's move on from that and do something that goes beyond Antarctica and talk about other endeavors, other great endeavors. And what happened was we said, well, we brainstormed and we thought, well, let's write about 11 things. And we just thought, well, 11 just seemed like a good number. And everything from the invention of early railways, how tunnels were built under rivers, how the Panama Canal was built, how things like the Northwest Passage was achieved, or people got to the South Pole, or people got to the North Pole, or got to Everest, got to the moon, got to early aviation, early automobiles, like all-terrain vehicles. And we started putting all this together, things like national parks, and we just had brainstormed this down to 11 things. And what happened was something quite remarkable and very unexpected. Was we kept seeing three names reoccurring. And those three names were Isambard Kingdom Brunel, who is a British Victorian-era engineer, Roald Amundsen, who is a Norwegian explorer from the early 1900s, and Theodore Roosevelt, who was an American president. And it was just like this eureka moment that we had. That was these three unique individuals. And we thought, and we immediately stopped writing. And it was all right at that point. We said, let's write about these three guys because they're so fascinating.
So let's break out of the individuals and let's look at the collective. And I've got just some questions about the traits that I think they all share. The first is, what was curious to me is if you look at these three individuals, they were early achievers. So they're all quite young when they're doing a lot of these great achievements. But also, so Brunel was the son of an engineer. Roosevelt was born into a wealthy family. Amundsen was part of a maritime family. So it's kind of in their blood. So the question I kind of wanted to ask you, do you need to be born into great achievements, or can they be curated? Is it nature or nurture?
That is a really good question. It's something that my co-author and I contemplated a number of times, because it did feel like, are we saying to people that you need to have had a father who was in the profession? And I guess my argument against that is Amundsen had brothers, Brunel had brothers, and these people came from big families, and their brothers didn't do this, they did this. Yeah. So what was it that was uniquely in them? And I think it is something that is a unique sense of purpose and passion. And again, jumping back to our strategic versus tactical, that they just saw the world in a different way than everybody else saw it. That when Brunel's building the tunnel, there's this 2-mile stretch between Bath and Chippenham where to get to his level line, he had to build a tunnel. Now, at that stage, no one had ever built a tunnel of that length. And he's like, well, it's going to take us 5 years. I'm going to start one end to the other end, and we're just going to start tunneling through with these. And they did it. And it's just these things were they just had this passion and perseverance that the job needed to be done, and They were the guys to make it happen. And they basically, the two teams, they tunnel in 2 years and they meet right in the middle and they're off by 2 inches. The
That's
dead center,
incredible, isn't it?
dead
Yeah.
center. Oh,
Yeah.
this is just incredible. I think
But
the Channel Tunnel may have been off by more.
yeah, no, yeah, absolutely.
Well, the Channel Tunnel's a lot longer, but yeah.
Yeah, even so, I think you talk about passion and purpose, and I really think that's crucial to their story, and crucial, I think, to people wanting to make similar achievements today. There's something about youth as well that I was trying to unpick. Was, again, they achieved quite early, and I just wondered if there's anything about being young that makes a difference here. Is it that you aren't encumbered by experience? I find as I get older, I tend to not do a lot of things because I'm like, nah, that'll never bloody work. Whereas when I was younger, I'd be more keen to jump in, oblivious to the things that may go wrong. So, is it about being young, or are there things that we can learn from the approach that actually, irrespective of our age, will help us achieve greater things?
Well, definitely being young helps. I always think that young people are feel like they're immortal. So they're a bit like they're indestructible. So whatever happens, they can whatever damage they can do, they can recover from. But interestingly, and I think one of the great traits of Amundsen, Brunel, and Roosevelt that we weren't expecting as we were working out the stories in the book was they all kept achieving, even into later life. Now, none of them lived to be really old, and our book's not a biography. It's not going like, here's the day they were born and here's like the details of their early childhood and things like that. It's more focused on these big endeavors. But in this, it's interesting that Amundsen goes from building the tunnel and the railways to building big ships and building the biggest ships in the world. And Roosevelt leaves the presidency and goes off on these hunting expeditions across Africa, and then does this expedition through parts of South America. So he's like off exploring, and he volunteers to actually, and when he's later in life now, he was approaching 60. He volunteers to go to World War I. He's just, this guy is just sort of indestructible and out there doing things. And Amundsen still was exploring, and he was keen to go to the North Pole and gets involved with early aviation, first person to start flying planes in the polar regions. It's, the age wasn't a barrier to them. They just had this passion to keep going. I think their passion was never to put their feet up. It's just.
I think if you're wired in that way, though, you can't. Do you know what I mean? It's a restless spirit, I think, is one of those, one of the attributes of those. Let's change gears slightly. One of the things I found really compelling about the story of each of the three individuals was how important failure was to actually drive them further forward. And I think one of the things that we underestimate the most in modern business is the positive power of failure. I don't think we deal well with failure. Talk to me about, what did they do? How did they, I'm trying to think what it was. I mean, Amundsen had several sort of abortive attempts to find the Northwest Passage. Brunel, the floods that he would have experienced, the cave-ins in the tunnel, but they came back stronger. What's going through their mind, and what can we learn from that? How do we use that in today's business to embrace failure a bit more readily?
Wow, that is a big question. The way I think about it is this, which is where most people think about the endeavor of being the finished thing, and that's what you're striving for. So you're striving to finish the tunnel, you're striving to finish the railway, you're striving to finish the Panama Canal. They didn't see it that way. They were striving to change the world, and so failure was just part of the process, because the process is not, oh, we'll never get the canal done. The process is, look at what we're going to do when the canal is finished. Goods from the west coast of America can get to the east coast of America without going through the bottom of South America. Goods from the east coast of America can get to the west coast of America. Same thing, without going through across the rough seas of South America. And the European trade, as the country's developing in the early 1900s, San Francisco and California becoming very important. but can't trade with Europe because it's so hard to get goods across. And so this is they're not, the setbacks are just setbacks. They're not, you're still striving for this big benefit. And
so
it's
the audacious goal, isn't it? I mean, and I think you use that phrase a few times as well as
and the title,
the title of the book. But it is it's being bought into that vision that makes all of the difference. The other thing that really I enjoyed seeing was how curiosity and learning played a part in all three of their stories. They all three, as individuals, seem to be insatiably curious about the world around them and the things that they were doing, and always open to learn. You know, at any point on their journey, they're trying to learn more. Which I thought is such a great lesson for us as we're trying to navigate this incredibly complex world that is changing, you know, and I know everybody says it, but it really is difficult. If you're a business right now trying to figure out, I mean, God, when I started doing these things, we used to talk about the post-pandemic new normal. Well, God knows we're beyond that, but nobody still can't figure it out. So it's what can we learn about what's going on? Do you think, again, you know, that's one of the key hallmarks of these individuals to have achieved these things? You have to be open to learning and be curious in order to be as successful as they were.
Yes, very definitely. I think they were constantly trying to figure out new methods, new approaches. Everything they were doing, they were trying to learn from and rethink and get better at, and delving into detail. I think that's one of the key things that I think people are shy away from now is details for other people, details for technicians, details for a group of engineers, or, you know, Roosevelt, the story of the locks, because originally they were building a sea level canal. Basically, you dig a big trench, you let the seas fill it. That's the Panama Canal. And ultimately they realized that's not possible. The canal will never get built. And at one point it was predicted that it'd take till 1927 to build the canal, which would be till like 20, 30 years to dig this trench. And it's just so difficult to do. And and so they go to Roosevelt with this idea for the locks. And he delves into the detail. This is the nature of these people. Yeah. They're not afraid of the very great detail they're going to need to learn to master. And because he's going to have to sell it to Congress.
Yes.
So it's
and it is. I mean, it is interesting because so often, don't we, as leaders, you know, don't bog me down with the details. Just give me the summary. And quite often, right. I think we miss all of the context in doing that. So I'm just, you know, conscious of time. So I want to go through to quick fire stuff, actually.
Okay.
Imagine we had let's get Bill and Ted, right? So we've got a time machine and we're going to build our dream team. So I've got Brunel, Amundsen and Roosevelt on the same team at the same time. Is that a dream team or is that going to be an unmitigated disaster?
Now that's a challenging question. That's a good question. I don't know. I think they're a dream team in that they all thought alike in that regard. They approach problems in a similar way, and they focus on solutions. But that doesn't necessarily mean they were team players in a sense. They were each leaders. I mean, Amundsen wasn't looking for team consensus in how they approached the Northwest Passage or how they approached the South Pole. He was the leader. He could take input from various people, but he was still the leader. Roosevelt as well was a leader like that, and Brunel as well. So I think, yeah, maybe they would clash.
Yeah,
go on. Sorry. The one thing I'd say is they had different levels, different expertise, and that may have helped if they stayed to their engineer, explorer, statesman craft.
Exactly where I got, and this never works, right? But if you are able to imbue them with the respect for each other's knowledge and experience and get them working together, that would be fantastic. I don't think the temperament of any of them would have made that work. So again, quick fire. I'm going to talk to you about some big problems that the world faces. Who would you want on your team to solve them? So let's start with the pandemic. Brunel, Amundsen, Roosevelt. Who are you picking to walk you through get you out of the pandemic?
Now that would take all. I'm going to dodge that question and say that would take all three of them. The way I see the pandemic is, and one of the big conclusions of the book is that you need to be an explorer, an engineer, and a statesman, and you need to look at all problems from those three perspectives. So the pandemic, very much exploring for solutions for vaccines, treatments, things like that. You've got the engineering. How do you actually produce vaccines that can go to billions of people? And the statesmancraft of how do you actually get the political will to make that happen? That is definitely if we had those three guys, we could achieve a lot.
I should have thought that through, shouldn't I?
That was a bit of a dodge.
Well, it wasn't, because it's the right answer, but I should have thought it through, because my next question is who would you want to solve climate change? But I think you've just answered that. It's the same challenge for me. I'd want Brunel figuring out, how are we going to do all of this stuff without killing the planet? I'd want Roosevelt selling, getting other countries to, look, we've all got to do this. We've all got to play our part. And then Amundsen would be interesting, because I think he would be the one that would be exploring sort of different ways of achieving things, and also cutting through a lot of the noise. I mean, if you think about, he was an individual who was not used to a lot of frills in his life, if you know what I mean. He was quite happy just to crack on and do what needed to be done. So that was my read of the three and how they would approach climate change. Do you share that? Do you think there's a different approach?
No, I think that's right on. That's spot on.
And then my other one, and look, this is a loaded question, right? Because I've clearly got an opinion. Brunel, do you reckon he would have built HS2? If he was here today, would he be building HS2?
What's your guess? Do you have an opinion?
Well, funny enough, I do, Brad. I might have an opinion on this. I think even today he'd be turning in his grave. If the fact that we were contemplating a high-speed train, he would be looking about, what's the a more relevant way of achieving the same outcome, and he would be looking to that, which I suspect wouldn't be a train. And may not even be moving people from point to point, but maybe moving data from point to point. And I say that as a technologist, but I think this sort of, I think he would be incredulous at us trying to solve that solution using the same technology that he pioneered a couple of 100 years ago. I don't know. I mean, I am as a technologist, I'm incensed by the whole thing, but.
That makes sense, because one of the things that's wonderful about the train he did build, because he wasn't saying let's put trains everywhere, but he did pioneer that at the very beginning, when they were starting to do cable messages, being able to send a wireless message, a wire-based message from point to point. The first installation of that was across the Wardenclyffe Viaduct, which you can see today. So it's over near Hanwell and near Ealing, and so this wire-based communication method was first used from point to point from London to Hanwell, and that ran along the train line.
I hadn't realised that until I read your book. And what an impact that had made. And I actually hadn't connected that with the thought I was having about HS2. So Brad, look, two very quick summary questions then. You picked three incredible individuals from a lot of history with great achievements. So we've got Brunel the engineer, we've got Roosevelt the statesman, we've got Amundsen the explorer. Who are their modern day equivalents? Who do you think that we will, our subsequent generations will be writing Audacious Goals number 2? Who are they going to focus on from our era, do you think?
Now that's a good question, because there's a lot of people doing a lot of adventuresome things. Certainly Elon Musk comes to mind, and Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs, a lot of the classical people try to do work in. Our interest was in people who worked in multiple different endeavors and pioneer in multiple different endeavors, but also brought a lot of creativity and ingenuity. They weren't necessarily nice people, and they weren't necessarily people that you might want to be friends with. So I think it's important to understand that we're not holding Roosevelt and Amundsen and Brunel up as saying these are role models that people should as human beings, because they had flaws like everybody, and you could definitely throw stones at each of them for various things that they did, but at the same time, they achieved greatly, and I think that's one of the great lessons from it.
It's interesting. Your point about not necessarily being nice people. You have to be able to be a bit different. I think to think as different as they did, and Jobs is the classic example, isn't it? And probably Musk today. If you want these, transformational outcomes, you need people who perhaps think in transformational ways. Where I want to leave it, Brad, is. We talked about the age that these people were at when they found their passion and purpose, and they were clearly in an environment that helped that to flourish. They clearly they were self-starters. It's not like they've got people paving the way for them. One of the things that concerns me is that we don't do enough in our society to inspire young people to become a Brunel or a Roosevelt or an Amundsen. And I just was interested in your perspective. What could we do? And especially, I was going to say, let's get specific. Let's not necessarily get specific, but if you look at the sort of the individuals, but also when it comes to diversity, how do we encourage people from different, genders, backgrounds, races, parts of the world to become these great achievers? What could we do?
Wow. Roosevelt had this wonderful line that was dare mighty things. And if I think about what are the three most important words in the English language that anyone needs to learn, it needs to be those three words, that you need to have the audacity, the conviction, the ability to just dare mighty things and go off and try to do them. And I think those don't have to be as big as going through the Northwest Passage or the Panama Canal or building railways. They can be much smaller, but they're still in your own sphere. That concept of what's the mighty thing I can go after? What's the mighty thing I can dare try to do and go do it? And Roosevelt did these wonderful speeches about things. And the remarkable thing is that's the motto that was used on the parachute for the Mars rover, which landed on Mars in February 2021. And the parachute that descended the Mars rover called the Perseverance, and the parachute had this embedded code in it. And that code said, dare mighty things, the exact quote from Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah, that's wonderful, isn't it? And that's such a great message. I just feel if we could equip, young people in their education to dare mighty things, I become less worried about climate change or problems like the pandemic. If we've got people who are confident, as those individuals would have been, the three people that we've talked about today, to tackle some of these phenomenally complex and huge challenges, giving people the ambition, the confidence, the ability, and through the attributes that you've listed, the ability to learn, the ability to be curious, the ability to listen to other people. These are the things for me, I think, are really set us up for success. Brad, it's been absolutely wonderful to have you on. I'm really, really having, as you can see, the book has been enjoyed and written in. I used to never write in books, but it's my new hobby. I quite like writing with a red pen too, not spelling mistakes, I might add, just things that are poignant to me. So thank you so much for joining us, Brad. It's been a real wonderful opportunity to have you with us.
Thanks very much, Dave.
So that was Brad Borkan. His book is Audacious Goals, Remarkable Results. You know where you can find it. I really recommend it. It's not only are there lots of great lessons for what we need to do in business, there are also some great stories about three great individuals at different times in our history. That's it for now. It's been great that you could join us. As always, if you enjoyed the show, you know the deal. Hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, or even you can subscribe to us still on YouTube. That'd be great. And I will see you again soon.
There are 1,000 stories in the Envisioner's future. This is just one of them.